Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the City Connect podcast with me, your host, Prince Carl. I thank you for tuning in to the second episode, and I promise you this is going to be a good one. I'm going to talk today about my experience working as a psychiatric assistant in a locked psych house or a psychiatric hospital. So, some call it a mental hospital. It was a very rewarding job. Some would say it's the Lord's work. It's not something you're going to make a ton of money doing. But it certainly lends itself to a lot of interesting stories, interesting experiences, and also rewarding experiences. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I worked at the Del Amo Behavioral Health System in Torrance, California. And I worked there from July 8th, 2013 to June 15th, 2016. I'm usually pretty good with dates. I don't know why. For some reason, my memory is always pretty good on those dates. But I worked there almost 3 years, and in that time, you know, I've got some good stories to tell. Today, I'm going to go over how and why I got hired, some of the scary moments that happened while I was there. And how it was probably the weirdest job, I think, imaginable. I don't think you could have a weirder job than that. Times that I was scared while I was working there. And then, you know, kind of what it was like day to day, giving meds, taking care of the unit, and then also some of the times that I saved a life. I saved people's lives twice, actually probably credited 3 times, that I got to directly save someone's life that if it weren't for my intervention, they would no longer be here. So that was a good feeling. But anyway, I just want to say just some quick things about the podcast in general. I started this podcast, excuse me, I really had no idea what to expect as far as listeners goes. It's been incredible the amount of people that are coming on board listening, and I truly appreciate that. And again, you know, I welcome you as a listener, and I'm going to keep you inspired and entertained. I think life should be fun and not boring. And so, you know, if you're in your car or you're at home right now, thanks for listening. But anyway, how/why I got hired. I was at kind of a low point. I was living in El Segundo, and I was in nursing school at the time. And so my plan was I was going to go to nursing school for about 3 years. It's actually close to 4 years. And then I was going to be a nurse and make good money as a nurse here in Southern California. And I'm not going to talk about the whole nursing school experience, but basically part of the nursing school program is what they would call, not an internship, but they would, I forget the word they call it, but it's sort of like in medical school, where in medical schools you'll have a surgical rotation, you'll have a ER rotation, you'll have a, you know, general family practice rotation, and something along those lines. But in nursing school, it's similar in the setup and how they educate you and keep you along on this program. So one of them was a psychiatric rotation. I think that's what the word they use, a psychiatric rotation. But anyway, I kind of knew that I was going to be going to psych hospital, and I really didn't have any experience with that. You've kind of heard about it here and there, about the nut house or the loony bin or the mental hospital, you know, these different terms. And, I never used any of those words when I was there. I never said the word crazy. I never really believed anybody was crazy. But it definitely, it brought me into this whole world of mental health and mental illness and healthcare in that sense. And so anyway, I was in nursing school, and they said, you got to go to the psych hospital for 2 weeks and kind of learn how that whole thing works. And some people were really dreading it. They didn't have any interest in being at the psych hospital. They were afraid for their safety. And I just kind of thought, all right, let's try this out. And as soon as I walked in there, I thought to myself, I would be really good at this job. I thought to myself, this is kind of a strange calling. I never really knew about this, but I remember I was there in nursing school, and we're kind of standing around, and we were talking to patients. So we had to prepare what they call these nursing care plans. If anybody's ever been in nursing school, they know what a nursing care plan is, and it's basically just sort of a report on how you would care for a specific patient, and what kind of medications you would give and so forth. So I was working on a nursing care plan, and we would have to talk to these different patients. So I was talking to this one patient, and I remember he was kind of he was paranoid delusional, and as I was talking to him, he was worried because he thought that there were cameras recording, and and as in the midst of talking to him, they had this day room. It's sort of set up like a hospital, but it's also a locked facility. It might kind of look like a jail in some senses, because there are locked doors, and there's reinforced windows, and there's kind of a yard area where the patients can go and hang out outside, but it's enclosed, so there's no way that you could really get out of it once you're in. You are in a locked facility as a patient there. But as I was talking to this guy about his particular story, and kind of interviewing him, a fight broke out, and there was two guys, and I kind of sensed that they were going to start fighting, and one guy was getting in another guy's face, and all of a sudden, he stands up and just starts pummeling him, just throwing punches left and right, just pounding him in the face. They were smaller guys, they weren't very big, they weren't like heavy hitters or anything like that, but they called what they call a code 10, and basically all of these other psychiatric workers from different wards in the hospital came and ran to the scene and showed up just seemingly out of nowhere, kind of contained the situation, broke the fight up. They gave the guys some medication because of their incident, and that was the end of it. And I was just kind of really intrigued by it. I think part of the reason too that I wanted to work at the psych hospital, because there was this girl that was in nursing school that I had my eyes on, and she was younger, and she was kind of into like dark, like heavy metal, like music and stuff, and I thought that was kind of cool. She was kind of like Wednesday Addams, from the Addams Family. Like she definitely had a dark side, and she definitely emphasized some of that in the way that she dressed, kind of like gothic, whatever, and that kind of thing. And I was just so obsessed with her and so into her. And so I think that part of my motivation was, I thought, like, if I said, hey, I got a job at a psychiatric hospital, that she would think that was really cool. And she did think it was cool. And we never ended up dating, but that was probably part of my motivation. But I mean, I think in my 3 years there, I was naturally good at it. It was just a perfect fit for me. I had the right combination of customer service skills, people skills, intuition. I was physically bigger than some of the other guys. I'm about 6'2", 200 pounds. So I am larger, than most guys, but at the same time, I don't really provoke anyone. So there were guys that would come in there and work, and they'd be all pumped up and have all these huge muscles and stuff, and they kind of would come in there like, hey, I'm going to throw my weight around, I'm going to be a badass, kind of how some people would get a job at security, like, hey, I just really want to fuck someone up, I'm going to be a security guard and take care of shit, that kind of attitude. I didn't have that attitude. I was always kind of friendly and nice, but at the same time, I was bigger. And some of the guys that were working there were like, I mean, these guys were 6'8". These guys were like a whole foot taller than me. I'd be talking to them, looking up. These guys were just big guys, just really tall. I talked about that job in some sense. It's kind of like having customer service skills on steroids. It's one thing to be able to read a customer and kind of know where they're at mentally or emotionally. Um, but you take on a whole new sense of customer service when you work at a psych hospital because your personal safety depends on it. If there's a patient that's talking to you in a certain way and you can't really read what's going on with them, or you can't really sense where they may be going or where this could go, you stand the possibility of being punched in the face, attacked, bit, spit on. So, like with police officers, they talk about de-escalation techniques. Their goal is to make it a peaceful situation and everybody goes home happy. They don't want it to get physical because it gets really, really messy. And it was the same way at the psych hospital. We don't want it to get physical, we really don't. So I was very good at just talking to these people. And 9 times out of 10, you could talk to someone and just kind of understand where they're coming from. They usually the patients had the same concerns and the same questions. Why am I here? Why am I locked up? Why can't I go home? Why can't I see my family? How long is this going to last? When do I get to talk to my doctor? What kind of meds am I going to be taking? What's this all about? And you kind of got this script where you could just say it in the most understandable way. So, so I was in nursing school. I was doing the rotation. I kind of saw how the whole thing worked, and I figured that I would be a very good fit for this. And there was the nursing manager, and there was also the head nurse, what do they call it, the chief RN, or the head, what do they call it? Head nurse. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got that term wrong. Director of nursing. Yeah. And somehow she put out a message that they would be hiring, and I was just a nursing school student, and I applied, and she hired me, and it was just like, okay, here we go. I thought it was pretty cool. I was like, told the other nursing students, I was like, yeah, I got a job over there at that hospital. I'm going to be working there. So I was kind of working there part-time. As I was in nursing school, and the plan was that I was going to get my RN, and after I got my RN, then I would go on to be a full-time RN at the psych hospital, already having had the necessary experience and so forth. About a year later, I dropped out of nursing school. That's a whole other story. But I got out of the nursing school, but I still had the job at the psych hospital, and that was kind of what was keeping me going. It was paying my rent, and that was what I was doing. And you get into a good flow of things. We worked these 8-hour shifts. It was 24/7, so it was 3 8-hour shifts. We would work 8-hour shifts. Typically in nursing they work 12-hour shifts, but we worked 8 hours because there were times when it would get a little bit wild and it could kind of wear you out. But I've always been very good at separating my work and my resting life. I'll leave my job and completely forget about it. Completely forget that I worked there. Completely forget what happened. Not really care. I've never been someone that takes work home with them. I literally walk away from the job and it's over with until I go back, and then I get right back into the swing of things. But it was a good group of people. We formed a good bond, and we take these trips to Vegas and stuff. And some of the scary moments, some of the stories that were a little scary were I'll go to first of the weird. A typical patient, like this patient named Bevy, all the patients, we had them on a first name basis. And Bevy came in, and she was very strange. And, she was sitting there, and we'd give them cigarettes, and I was kind of in charge of the whole unit. There was about 35 to 40 patients on the unit. The men and the women were separated. It's kind of similar to a homeless shelter, kind of similar to a jail. But anyway, Bevy was telling me, and she'd stand there and talk to me. And if you filmed this conversation I was having with Bevy, you probably wouldn't know which person was in the psych hospital and which person was working there. And the reason for that is that I had to not argue with any of their strange delusional ideas. I had to simply kind of go along with it, to the point, not that I would add to it, but just not argue with and just sort of understand it. And that was the cool thing about the psych hospital, is that it was this place where everyone, the patients and even some of the people working there, were free to dream. They were free to think outside of the box. These people were not boring in any sense. They were not run-of-the-mill. They were not routine, and they were not trying to be routine. They were, in a lot of ways, thinking in a very tangential level. And when you start to sort of listen, some of it maybe makes a little bit of sense. I've never been one to get into too many conspiracy theories or weird stuff like that, but sometimes people tell you these stories and they end up being true. There was a famous actor, and his sister was there. I'm not going to name names, but this guy's a very famous actor, and this woman was telling me that, yeah, that's my brother, and he's become very famous in Hollywood and so forth. And I actually did a little research, and I found out it was true. So some of the stuff they said was true. But Bevy and I were talking, and we're doing a smoke break, and I'm out on the yard, and I was giving her a cigarette, and I could tell that she didn't really know how to smoke cigarettes, and it was probably a new thing for her. Because some of the patients smoked, and some didn't, but we would all give them cigarettes. So inevitably you had some patients that would start to smoke as a result of their stay at the hospital. But anyway, she was like blowing the cigarette really strangely, like, it was just kind of weird, and she was just telling me there was nothing wrong with her, and then she just kind of looks at me and she tells me that I'm her son, and I was kind of go along with it, and I developed kind of a name for myself. The patients all kind of knew me, because some of these patients they would be on if you get admitted to a psych hospital as a psych patient, you have been designated as a 5150, which is a mandatory 72-hour hold. So if you say something along the lines using the K word, kill, say you're going to kill yourself, say you're going to kill somebody, say you're going to do something crazy, and the police are called, you will be designated as a 5150, and then you go to the psych hospital for 3 days. In those 3 days, it's not really a criminal, you haven't been arrested, you haven't been charged with any crimes. But it's those 3 days when they sort of determine your well-being and whether or not you are a danger to yourself or others. So a lot of people don't understand that. People have been put on a 5150 for very simple things. Just so you know, to be arrested, you have to have, the arresting officer has to have what's called probable cause. Probable cause is actually a pretty high standard. He has to have probable cause that you committed a crime, evidence to back it up, and so forth. So it's actually a pretty high standard before you're actually arrested for a crime. A 5150 is a much lower standard. It's whether or not the officer or the nurse on scene feels that you are a danger to yourself or others. So it's very, very vague. And really anyone who says anything strange or crazy could be designated as a 5150. That's what a lot of people don't know. One guy came into the psych hospital, and this guy, I was looking at him, very well clean cut, kind of talked to him a little bit. He was from Orange County. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. Because the thing is, when I worked there for 3 years, I had thousands of psych patients, and I can sense crazy like that. I can sense when someone's had mental health issues. I can sense when I can just sort of almost call what mental health issues they probably are dealing with, and most likely what medications they're on. It's just, you just get really good at it. But this guy had nothing going on. I mean, this guy was absolutely normal in every sense of the word, well-dressed, clean-cut. So I started talking to this guy. He was middle-aged, about 45-year-old white guy, and I said, what's going on? Why are you here? And he goes, oh, this is the craziest story. He said, I called Bank of America this morning at 9 a.m., and I was getting really frustrated with their customer service, and they weren't answering my questions. And at some point, I said over the line, I said, if we don't get something done here, I'm just going to kill somebody because I'm just so sick of this. That was the quote that he made. So when you call Bank of America for customer service, everything's being recorded, guys. Unfortunately, he said the K word. which, as I explained earlier, the K word is certainly enough to get you designated as a 5150. And he said he made the phone call at 9 a.m. They had a peaceful end to the phone call around 9:30 a.m. And at 11 a.m., the LAPD came to his house. And the LAPD explained the whole thing of a 5150 and 72-hour hold. And you're not being arrested, but we have to put you in handcuffs and bring you to the cop car, and we're taking you over to the psych hospital, and we'll deal with it there because you said you were going to kill somebody. And that is recorded, and we have the recording right here. So, yeah, when you call customer service, don't say the K word, guys, because you could be going to the psych hospital. Some of them were just as simple as, like, we had a youth ward, too. There was about 7 wards. There was a youth ward. There was a kind of a drug rehab ward. There was a PTSD ward. There was an intensive treatment unit ward. There was a transitional ward. I think that's... did I say 6 or 7? But this guy was a young kid. He was about 16. He was on the youth ward. And again, I was like, there's nothing wrong with this guy. What's this guy doing here? And he told me that he posted on Facebook something to the effect of, he was talking about his relationship he had with a girl. And he posted something on Facebook, and it said, quote, "I'm just done with it all." The meaning of the post was that he meant he was done with it all, meaning the relationship, but it was somehow perceived that by saying I'm done with it all, that I'm done with life in general. So one of the parents saw the post on Facebook, called the cops, and as soon as the cops show up, they're sort of like robots. They have to follow protocol. They have to do their job, and if there's something that they feel that this person could be a danger to themselves or others, they have to take them to the psych hospital. Quick little tip: if your kid ever gets arrested or taken to the psych hospital, you, as the legal guardian, have every right to discharge them immediately from the psych hospital. You do not have to have your kid there for the full 72 hours. A lot of people don't know that. And so again, like I know how people can make mistakes and say the wrong things and get locked up in the psych hospital. I also know how to get out of the psych hospital. Again, I'm not really a lawyer. I'm not going to get into whole legal advice or anything here. Some of the other strange stories, this guy named Eaton. And this guy was younger. He was experimenting with drugs. Let me say about drugs. Some people can do drugs and be fine. They know their limits. They know what drugs they can do. They know how the body's going to react, and they know how to get off of it, and and pretty much how it's going to go. Some people don't, and some people try drugs, and some of the marijuana strains that are out there right now are really, really way more potent than it ever was in like the 60s or the 70s. I mean, they're full-on hallucinogenic marijuana strains. Sometimes they're laced with other chemicals, laced with PCP, and some of these people are these young guys, and they're just at a party, and everything's going well, and they try some drugs, and all of a sudden, they have a psychotic break. The definition of a psychotic break that I would say, it's very similar to sleepwalking, having a very long dream, but not being able to wake up from it for 3-4 days. It's very strange to see someone in a psychotic break because they're talking. Sometimes they don't make any sense. They may not have slept for 3 days or 4 days, and they're just sort of lost. Very, very odd how it plays out. Kind of scary in a sense. And some of these teenagers in the youth ward would have psychotic breaks. A lot of times the girls would have psychotic breaks earlier, which is kind of sad because that basically means that person is going to be dealing with mental illness kind of the rest of their life. And so the first psychotic break is usually the worst. And, you'd see these girls and they would just come in speaking strange languages, maybe having strange accents. Speaking about complete nonsense. Maybe you can have about a 30% conversation with them that 25 to 30% might make sense. They might say a few things that make sense, but other things just don't make sense. They might just take off their clothes, start walking around, Like I said, they're sort of sleepwalking. So if someone's sleepwalking and they're in a dream state, they're gonna say a few things that make sense, but they're gonna do a lot of really strange things. And so this kind of goes on for 3 or 4 days until they kind of snap out of it, and ultimately their brain starts to take control, and it gets better. It's not a lifelong thing. And again, the mental hospital that I was in, it was what they called acute care. So this was people who were actively trying to kill themselves or hurt themselves or kill others. They're having a very, very intense bout of mental illness. And once they sort of stabilize, got on the meds, if the meds is what worked, or not got on the meds, then they would be discharged to like a longer term care place, or just sent home and just kind of watch things. But these were people who really were having a really rough time, and it were brought out by some sort of stressors, maybe divorce, job loss, different sort of things can make people just kind of snap. Some of the younger youth people on the ward, or these were kids aged 13 to 17 that were having psychotic breaks. The parents would start an exorcism on their kid. Usually, like in the Asian cultures, they would do that. There weren't any exorcisms performed at our hospital. But if you saw the way that these people were behaving in the midst of their deep psychosis, speaking in strange languages and doing strange things, you can reasonably understand why you feel that people would want to have an exorcism. And it's weird to talk about that, because some of the nurses that I worked with were not religious in any sense. They weren't Catholic. They did not go to church. But there would be patients who would come in and say, yeah, we tried an exorcism. There were also a lot of patients in the state of psychosis when they would talk about seeing demons or seeing the devil. And what I found interesting about that was that their stories were usually very consistent. So they would usually describe a demon as being, all black shadows with jet black eyes, and looking at the demon would just be the thought or the feeling of pure evil. And I heard that from several patients, and I thought that was interesting. There's a movie called Ghost with Patrick Swayze, when these demons come out and they're like these shadows that kind of creep, and that, I guess, was a good visual representation of that. But people who had no sense of religion or believing in God or the devil would actively talk about seeing the devil or demons and so forth. And so that's kind of an interesting side of it. And a lot of these people, in the midst of their acute mental illness, felt that they were trapped in their own brains, trapped in their own bodies. And I really had a lot of empathy, and I felt sorry for them. I'm very fortunate not to have had to ever deal with any mental illness myself, other than becoming stressed out or, just hard times. I'm very fortunate, but some people, were born with mental illness. It does run in the family. It's very genetic. We have this one patient who would come in, and then like 2 weeks later, her daughter would come in, and they were kind of one in the same vein. It was like mother and daughter were both in the psych hospital, and I always kind of felt bad for them and felt bad for their dad, and I would help them a lot. They were really sweet. They always loved me. They were always happy to see me. I actually saved the mom's life one time. It was kind of weird because I saw them driving around town one time. They're kind of waving, "Oh yeah, there's Carl." They always called me Superman. So if you're listening to this podcast, and you were a patient over there, hopefully I was able to help you out. And I don't think there were really any patients that hated me or had it out for me. I was always the good guy, the nice guy. there were some dicks that worked there. You know, there were some guys that were just kind of rude, and just rude people that were rude to the patients, and I always kind of looked at it as an opportunity to serve them and care for them and help them out, you know, in these hard times. But I did get scared there a couple of times. Like I said, I got very, very good at the job. I was able to do my job on autopilot, be aware of my surroundings, be aware of the patients. I mean, I was really, really good at it, and they could definitely tell it, because there were so many people that would come in and out. Oh, I want to try working in a psych hospital, or, you know, they would try it and it just wasn't for them. You know, they just couldn't get it. Maybe they, a whole myriad of reasons. Like, there's a certain personality type and skill set you have to have, and it's just, I was just a natural fit at it. But you know, they were kind of, there was a president. They had this guy that was the CEO that was working there when I was there, and he was ultimately fired for mismanaging the place. But during the time that he was working there, I think he was actually prosecuted. His mismanagement was so bad. I think he was embezzling. I don't know. I don't want to get off into that whole thing. But this individual, who I won't mention his name, he was just really trimming the budget as much as he could. He was trying to increase the revenue and decrease the expenses, you know, as a business owner, leader. And he had a really small, what I would call him, a skeleton crew. And I remember sitting there one night, and it was the middle of the night, and all the other guys in the psych hospital had gone on break. And for those 4 hours, I was just sort of the only guy in the psych hospital. And if something happened, if there was a fight, if there was a serious problem, I knew that there was no one else to call. And I was a little bit on edge. And thankfully everything was smooth and everything went well. Most of the time at the psych hospital, I'd say 97% of the time, 95% of the time, everything was very smooth and routine. But it's not about that 95% of the time or 97% of the time. It's about the 3% of the 5% of the time when things go crazy. What do? So it's kind of like a cop. I mean, you can talk to a cop and they're like, yeah, 98% of my shifts, very routine, very boring, very easy. But then there's that 2%, you know. So, yeah, everything was smooth and it was okay. But there was definitely some crazy times when I can say too that I remember looking up at the full moon, and this is kind of weird just to talk about, but looking up at the full moon, I just had a sense that a lot of times the full moon, it was going to be a really rough night at the psych hospital. And this theory of mine is supported by several sources. You know, werewolf is this whole idea that people go crazy when there's a full moon, and I think Plato has a quote that says that the full moon turns the tides of men, something along those lines. There's been books written on this. I read a book on it.